So what is Journey to the Overland? Journey to the Overland is described as a solo tabletop role-playing game. And to kind of break that down, it's solo, which means the game can be played by one individual by themselves. And just about everything that you do in the game you can do by yourself using the game rules. I wouldn't say that you actually play against the game or against the rules, but rather the rules allow you to have an amount of open-ended play. And by open-ended play, what I'm talking about in particular is at any given moment you can kind of change what you're trying to do in the game. And that's why we use the term role-playing, because like in a role-playing game, there may be certain adventures where you're trying to level up your character, which you can do in Journey to the Overland. There may be certain times, for example, where you are going on a quest, and so there's quests in Journey to the Overland. There's a chance to obtain skills, advanced skills. There's also opportunity to gain wealth, to accumulate wealth, to buy things, to have possessions. And basically it's kind of open-ended in that you pick the path you want your character to take. Now at any given moment you can be thrown off that path, you can be thrown off that course, because that is the dangers of traveling in the overland. You never know what you're going to encounter, you never know what's going to happen. One of the key aspects of the game is visiting towns and castles and doing things in those towns and castles. For example, in a typical town or castle, you're going to maybe want to buy provisions or supplies. You may want to do what's called seek news and information, where you kind of find out what's been going on in the town or what the news is. There may be things where you want to have a visit with the mayor or the king. All of those are handled by the game mechanics, and a lot of them can actually lead to other adventures within adventures within adventures. So, for example, you might set out on a quest to obtain what are known as one of the 5 weapons of power, which are like the 5 most powerful artifacts in the land. But say you go to a town, you get some news and information from a king or one of the mayors, and they tell you, hey, there's a tribe of orcs out in this hex that we'd like you and your party to go defeat. If you beat them and come back, we'll pay you some gold, or I'll get you an audience with the king. So you go off and you head there. Now, on your way there, you may have adventures that detour you. You may get attacked. You may get arrested. You may just decide to join a traveling troop or something else. And those are handled through the game cards called the encounter cards. But let's say eventually you get back to that mini quest. You find the orcs. You defeat the orcs. You then return to the town to the mayor. You go back to the mayor. You get another audience. You roll and say, hey, we want our money. The mayor says, screw you, I'm not paying you anything. Okay, now there may be things where you can attack, or you may just have to take that and suck it up. But if he does pay you, you then get back to your original quest, which is going after the weapons of power. So that's what we mean by it being open-ended. Tabletop means essentially the game is going to be played on a hex map of Overland. You'll have a figure or a counter which represents you, and you're going to go through this map. But unlike a role-playing game in and of itself, it's going to be essential that you use the map, because the map is going to be a numbered hex, which means that the numbers and things that occur in hexes may be permanent. So you may buy a home in a certain kingdom, and you'll get a hex number, and you may store things in that home. And so if you're off for a year or two somewhere else, you're going to want to know where you left your home and where you can get your things, or even your family, because it is possible to start a family in the game. And then there's also aspects of the game where you can use counters, and you can amass troops, and you can attack towns or castles and lay siege to them. And so that would actually get played out on the map. And there's simple rules for these. And one of the nice things about the game is a lot of the rules can be plugged in and out. For example, there's an optional combat system where you can actually set up your miniatures, and depending on where a figure is located to another figure, if he's behind the figure, on the side of the figure, you get bonuses in the attack, so it can kind of extend combat. Or you can do kind of the straight paper and pencil combat. In doing Journey to the Overland, my inspiration was primarily drawn from a game called Barbarian Prince, which was put out by Dwarf Star and Heritage Games in the 80s. And essentially in Barbarian Prince, you played a character named Cal Arath, And as Cal, your objective was to travel from your town to try to get 500 gold pieces, at which time you would win the game because you had enough to overthrow the king who had usurped your father, or to get some troops or a king to agree to place you back on the throne. And that kind of element is built into the game, but what I wanted to do was expand that. Because if you played Barbarian Prince, obviously it's not an easy game, but if you get 500 goals, the game just kind of stops. And okay, you won. You don't ever actually go back and take the throne, or you don't ever actually return with your troops. You may get an invitation with a king, and the king says, "I'm going to help you get your throne back," and that's the end of the game. So I didn't want the game to end, so I kind of made my own version that doesn't end. This is why it's open-ended. I also drew inspiration from games like Lone Wolf, the Lone Wolf series by Joe Deaver, and the Magnum World, which I really enjoyed as a kid, and I really enjoyed the story and the rich detail in that. And so I tried to put some of those elements in there. I also drew inspiration from Conan the Barbarian, especially the comics from Marvel that were done by John Buscema and Ernie Chan, because I thought they just had some excellent adventures and excellent stories. And, I always tried to work elements of that into some of my stories and adventures as far as the ideals of the kind of things you encounter in a real fantasy world. I was inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons, obviously. There's elements of going into dungeons and things that you can search for. There is a dragon in the game, which is one of the objectives if you can try to defeat the dragon. And, other than that, I also drew inspiration that I liked war games. I liked moving counters and chips. And so if you get to the point where you become a knight, because usually there's only certain characters in JTO that can actually lead troops, but a knight is one. If you become a knight, you can then actually have troops that are represented by chits in the game or counters. But, you could obviously use figures if you have maybe 15 or 20 millimeter figures, because the map wouldn't accommodate, Warhammer armies. But, so there is some wargaming elements in it. And essentially, what I tried to do with the game, and I did the game a long time ago, was just kind of allow you to exist in a world where you kind of bring together a lot of the other fantasy and gaming worlds into one game or one book. I think anybody that plays the game is going to enjoy it. There's an awful lot in it, and there's a lot more than what I've talked about, some of which we may get to through stretch goals. If not, then we'll hopefully be able to do supplements or follow-up Kickstarters later to publish some of those. So we like your support, and thank you for your time and attention.